Stand by. Okay. There we go. All right. And now let's get it to JR. All right. And he says we're confirmed. Let me check the connection on X. Yep. All right. And I think we are good. Let me just check, folks. All of our connections. Remember, there we go. I see it now. There I am. Kind of. Late night last night. Good. There we go. Let me just check. Yep. Okay. We're live on YouTube, on X, Facebook, and the radio, and on DePietro.com. Let me just double check. There it is. Yes. This is our YouTube connection. Just double check. There it is. Yep. Yes. All right. Crowd is filing in. All right. Now we just wait for JR to give us the go ahead, and we will formally begin our program after what was a very late night. I have not even had time to fully edit yet. I meant to have all right. Audio should be okay. I don't know how that happened. I don't know why that happened. Okay. No audio. Okay. We should be good now. We should be good now. Suddenly, I was fine, and then all of a sudden it's back. I'm assuming that I hit something. There we go. All right. Whatever, folks, if all of a sudden the audio goes out, thank you, Bendy. Just assume that I unknowingly hit something. All right. Why don't we get started before something else happens? Oh my God. Listen, enough of that. Yes, there is. There is sound on Facebook. I know people are trying to help me. I have people that do that. All right, let me go to, I was in such a nice mode. There I am. And let me just pull it up. All right, let me go to. Sounds like sound to me. All right, all set. I appreciate that. No need. We have other people that do that. Okay. No need. Others for that. Okay. Where was I? I was talking about last night and then what happened in East Greenwich. Now, Do we have the video up on dpetro.com yet? No, we don't have it up on DePetro. We'll get it up on dpetro.com. Let me just make sure I don't mute it again. But it will be going up, brought to you by the Coesit Inn. Now listen, Easter is coming. So with Easter, you know, it's a great spot that can accommodate a large group. The Coesit Inn, 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick, lunch, dinner, and drinks in the lounge. And they're waiting for you, as I like to say, at the Coesit Inn. And don't forget about the market at Coesit. But again, Easter dinner, make your reservation now. You know, and also a lot of people get together and go out on Palm Sunday, or maybe people get together on Good Friday after services, the Coesit Inn, but especially with Easter weekend coming up. 226 Coesit Avenue, West Warwick. Remember what we say, lunch, dinner, drinks in the lounge, and they're waiting for you at the Coesit Inn. All right, we have the sound straightened out. I'm not exactly sure what happened, but we're just going to continue. But as I was mentioning, you know, last night was a good example. Then we caught, there was a robbery. Someone was shoplifting at Dollar Tree. By the way, shoplifting is still a crime. I know in a lot of parts of the country, it's not considered a crime. It is a crime. And then it hurts everybody. So, and you saw right there, Providence Police totally grabbed the suspect right there by the side of the road. And what do I always say? I always say on road patrol, listen, if something breaks, we'll go back and we'll be live. And something did. And I want to credit David Sammartino. He was all over it. Okay, yes, Carol also jumped in and helped out with some details. David originated and had the story. And for those of you that missed it, and I don't even know if the rest of the media even have the story, but because it was a late night and then I had a busy morning, and but there was an armed bank robbery in Stonington, Connecticut, and then they somehow tracked the plate to someone that lives in East Greenwich, Marlborough Street. You know, thank you to all the progressives that demand low-income housing. That's where the crime is. And they tracked it there. I believe East Greenwich Police, I'm not entirely sure, but I believe they were kind of sitting on the vehicle. And boom, pulled them over on Main Street. They had the ski mask. Great grab by East Greenwich Police, by the way. So great grab by East Greenwich Police. I'm sure the investigation still has a ways to go. But my point is, when the night had ended, the night didn't end. And then we were live till 11 o'clock. So will we be active this afternoon and tonight? The answer is yes. I'm going to touch on a number of stories right now. We are going to touch on the West Warwick school situation, because I don't know what's going to come from that. And then also I'm following what's going on with the Naked Fat Coach as well. But folks, this portion of the program, Naked Fat Test Coach Thomas, I don't think this is playing out the way they thought it would. And I'll share my thought on that in just a moment. But this portion of the program, brought to you by Propane Plus. Call them today, 401-885-4209. In Massachusetts, 508-252-3359 for Propane Plus. If you use propane, you want to get in touch with Propane Plus. I implore you to contact them. They also have a very user-friendly website. You just log on propaneplus.com. You type in your zip code, residential or commercial. Boom, you're connected. It's Propane Plus. Remember, you can call them if you like in Rhode Island, 401-885-4209, or in Massachusetts, 582-252-3359 for Propane Plus. Now, folks, good afternoon. This is the real news on this Thursday at 1:13. I'm just going to mention very briefly, I know that there were a number of people that went to a school committee meeting in West Warwick last night, and they're upset over the way the school, primarily the school, maybe and also the police, handled it. This is my reaction to it. You know, I've interviewed people that have gone through AA, and there's apparently, I have never been through AA, but there's an expression in AA, nothing changes if nothing changes. Meaning that if you just keep doing everything the same,
don't expect that anything is going to change. It's just a matter of time. When are people going to start to elect leaders, not people that are just whatever they're doing? They're not leaders. The state needs to enact and elect leaders. The people, I don't live in West Warwick. The people of West Warwick, you don't just go and vent and then that's the end of it. It's time to elect some people who will be leaders. I agree with this situation regarding a student that was making threats. The police said it was not credible. The police said it was unfounded. But clearly, people were upset with the way the school and the police handled it. I come back to the school committee. Who's electing these people? Who are these people? You know, most of the time, they just kind of float through until something happens. And then you find out who you can rely on and who you can't rely on. So I believe Rhode Island voters, next year is when there's going to be elections again. And it becomes a matter, is this going to be the time that people finally stand up and start to elect leaders instead of people that just cave and they're people that don't belong in office? And I'll give you a perfect example of this that won't get the play that it should. It's about Governor McKee. And I'm going to tell you in a moment. But I want to use this opportunity, folks. Kids Club on the Pike. Kids Club on the Pike is so fantastic. Yes, you can use it for birthday parties. Yes, you can use it for teen parties, anything to do with children. Birthday party venue, before and after school care, preschool, half and full day program for preschool children. But they also have summer camp. Call Kristen. They're right off of 295 on the Cranston-Johnson line. You can get to them from anywhere. It's Kids Club on the Pike. Call them 401-443-5336. 401-443-5336. Reserve the spot for your child or grandchild at Kids Club on the Pike. Maybe it's for a week. Maybe it's for a month. Maybe it's the whole summer. But reserve your spot now. Kids Club on the Pike and their summer camp. Huge reviews. 401-443-5336. I want to just touch on, this is a story that isn't going to get a lot of play. And it should get a lot of play. But I just know that it won't. But it shows you the lack of leadership that we experience in the state. And it starts with the person that right now occupies the office of governor. And by the way, I'm not convinced that he's not going to be reelected next year in 26. I've talked about it, by the way. Remember, we don't have legitimate elections. Our ballot collecting process is not only different than most of the country, but it's different than Massachusetts and Connecticut, and no one talks about it. And the elected Republicans at the State House, none of them talk about it. The fact, why are we different than Massachusetts and Connecticut? We shouldn't be different than Massachusetts and Connecticut. We should at least be in line with Mass and Connecticut. Governor McKee is running for re-election because he believes that once again, he can manipulate the vote and win the primary, and then they're not worried about the general election. So is this, if he looks at his poll numbers, should he be running? No, of course not. He's unpopular. The state is basically collapsing around him. He's unethical. This guy does not belong as governor. But they know how to manipulate the ballots. And I just don't see, do you know right now, I don't see, or I haven't heard of any legislation to try to change the way ballots are done. I can't do it. I'm not elected official. Contact State Senator Jessica De La Cruz. Contact Chippendale. I don't hear anything. But here's the story. McKee scraps, and this is, I'm not saying it's the biggest thing in the world, but it should be noted. McKee scraps ACI consolidation plan opposed by correctional officers. Now, they're going to pretend that this was, well, the cost of construction and blah, blah, blah. Now, you go back to the governor's state of the state. When Governor McKee, and this isn't a long story, but when Governor McKee delivered his state of the state, you had one group, teachers that were going to picket him and protest before his state of the state. And then you also had correctional officers were going to join it. And what happened? McKee met with them over the weekend before his, quote, state of the state. And then suddenly all problems went away. And at the time, I said, okay, he made very expensive promises to them in order to get them to not picket him. Now it's just a matter of what promises did he make? What secret agreements did he make on your behalf? Providence Journal. Governor Dan McKee has scrapped a cost-saving plan to consolidate the underused minimum security prison at the ACI. Now, they say because of its exploding projected cost. I don't believe that. When has that ever stopped them? Because of the exploding projected cost. Did that stop them from building the Superman? I mean, with the renovations plan for the Superman building? Did it stop them with the soccer stadium? That's not what it is. The plan, which was included in his state budget proposal, would have seen the minimum security population moved into a separate segregated unit inside medium security. Now, that sounds like a good plan. That sounds like a way to save us money. Who doesn't like it? The correctional officers. The current minimum security building can house 710 inmates. There are now only 135 of them. Let me repeat those numbers. 19% capacity. Minimum security right now at the ACI. The building can hold 710. How many are there? 135. 19%. McKee's budget allocated $1 million to fold minimum security into the medium security building, and it assumes $6 million in total savings. In a full year, the administration estimated consolidation would save the state close to $13 million. It sounds like a great plan. But Department of Correction officials, the prison guards, told lawmakers, consultant hired to study reported it would be too expensive. According to who? Instead of $1 million, the work done would cost anywhere from $67 million to $92 million. I don't believe that. They're lying. That's what they do. That's what the union leaders do. Department of Corrections Assistant Director. Strictly on housing to allow the transfer of inmates to medium security. But a study by a consultant they paid and told them, if you pay them, they'll say whatever you want. Oh, you can't does that make sense to anyone that you can't transfer an inmate? Instead of just being in this building, you're going to be in this building? Does that make sense to anyone listening? Of course not. Or watching? No. What it means is you wouldn't need all of these correctional officers. Oh, no. You have to have new roadways, and you got to have new fences, and the Department of Corrections wouldn't release the copy. Of course not. With the minimum security consolidation plan terminated, they're trying to find budget savings through reductions in overtime spending. Do you know at the ACI, you have a budget, you have an overtime budget. I'm not going to ask, how much do you think the correctional officers exceed the overtime budget? Now, keep in mind, they have a budget, and within their budget, they have a budget for overtime, right? How much would you guess? If you guessed 30 million, you would be right. Folks, that's why you have correctional officers that make close to $380,000 a year. It is a racket. They totally rig it and take advantage of the system. And just Correctional Officers Union had opposed consolidation. Of course they did. They don't want to change anything. This is insanity. Of course they should consolidate. I'll just leave it at this. Is there anyone listening that thinks that you have a building, you're at 19% capacity. It can hold over 700. You're at 135. Listen, we're going to close this building and move them over here. Oh, no, you can't do that. It's a rigged game. But here's the bottom line. McKee scrapped it in order to get their vote. He didn't stand up to them. He should have said, listen, we're closing that building. You want to picket my state of the state? You pick it. But it's not changing. There's no backbone with this guy. Governor McKee, I'm telling you, he should be checked because I don't think he physically has a spine. He caves in 2 seconds. Who else would say, if you land in Rhode Island, you're a Rhode Islander? If you're from Cuba and you make your way to Rhode Island, in my mind, you're a Cuban who's now suddenly in the 401. But McKee's mind, oh, no, you're a Rhode Islander. You're not. You're not. How many people go to visit Florida during the season, right? All the snowbirds and so forth. In order to be a Florida resident, you have to live there 6 months in a day. And there's a lot of people that do that 6 months in a day. So that you can't be in your home state. I mean, there's residency requirements. There's a lot of people years ago, the kids that want to go to the schools on the West Coast, and they had to up the amount of time you had to live in a state in order to qualify for in-state tuition. I remember hearing stories of these guys that graduated from high school. I think they went to Hendricken and they moved out to Los Angeles and they worked for a year. Back then, I think it was just 1 year. They lived there. They became residents of California. Boom. Then they entered UCLA as California students. But this notion that if you arrive in Rhode Island, as Sabina Matos likes to say, oh yeah, if you arrive here, that makes you a Rhode Islander. It's foolishness. But he is just absolutely gutless. Nothing. The idea that you're going to keep a building going, but with 19% occupancy, there's no business in the world that would do that. Nothing. But they do the same thing with the schools. The Providence teacher, well, you can't close that school. Some of the Providence schools have less than 30% occupancy. Less than 30% of the school is used by students. Well, then why don't they close one school and have all the students go to another one? Because of the teachers union. Folks, 126 on this Thursday. The prison story won't get the coverage it should, but it shows again, he caved behind closed doors and said, all right, I'll scrap the consolidation, even though it totally makes sense. He said to them, all right, find me a consultant study that I can point to say it's too expensive. So they said, all right, we'll find someone. Listen, folks, there's people out there. You pay them 20 grand, 25 grand, 50 grand. They'll come up with whatever. Well, they'll come up with whatever you want. They'll come up with that the Providence skating rink could be turned into a prison if you pay them enough money. Folks, this portion of the program, remember when disaster strikes, Serve Pro of Providence. Call them today, 401-941-5500. Whether it's fire or water or mold, Serve Pro Providence, 401-941-5500. When disaster strikes, you need someone dependable, reliable, fast, thorough, professional. Serve Pro Providence. That's who I call. That's who I would call. If I found out I had mold in my home or business, or if I had a fire, or then you have water damage, flooded, I would call Serve Pro Providence. They're the only ones I would call. 24/7. Restoration reliability results. 401-941-5500. Now, I received an email from Lisa. Lisa is going to go to the home show. And Lisa's thinking of having some of her home remodeled and asked who is the company that I recommend she stop by and see at the Rhode Island Home Show, which opens today through Sunday. Arch Design Builders. Arch Design Builders. Now, Lisa, when you go to the home show, they are in booth 804. Arch Design Builders. You get a chance to spend time with Ed and Roxanne at Arch Design Builders. Call them 401 207 4124. 401 207 4124. Arch Design Builders. Remember, kitchen or bathroom or basement. Listen, have a conversation with the dream team, Ed and Roxanne. Show them the space. Maybe it's for a new deck. Maybe it's for your basement. Arch Design Builders. One thing I know is when you deal with Ed and Roxanne, you're not going to want to deal with anyone else. Arch Design Builders. Look for them at the home show, 401 218 9707. Now, the trial continues. And again, good afternoon, everybody. 129 on this Thursday. And the trial continues regarding the naked fat test coach. So I want to just go through some of the latest, because I think, let's see. Oh, okay. They're going to show a video of the coach being interviewed by the police. You know who's doing a really good job with this is Gabrielle Caracciolo of NBC 10. So let's see. I saw her. She was in court when Roberta, the caregiver for Linda, was in court. Okay. Let's see. Well, she right now, I think on the stand they had the detective, who was investigating. Okay. This is just some of the first witness of the day, Barbara Morse, former North Kingstown High School teacher, assistant vice principal, and later principal. First learned of the fat testing from the superintendent in February 21, when he called to tell her Thomas would be suspended following a student complaint. Morse said she hadn't seen Thomas since she walked him out of the building that day. She also testified students shouldn't have been alone with the teacher at all. Next up, Michael Waterman on the stand. He worked in several roles within NK schools. Director of Technology, Interim Superintendent, Chief Operating Officer. He learned of the issues when he was asked to suspend Thomas' school email and card access. Took photographs of the office, noting wanted to preserve everything. Jury's being shown the pictures on the map of the school the pictures are taking. After an attorney sidebar, witnesses removed. Defense doesn't want Waterman testifying about missing Excel files that will move to an external hard drive. That's interesting. The defense says Thomas is prepared to testify he took hard drives back and forth between home and school. They're concerned if Waterman testifies about missing files right now, the jury will draw inferences why they're missing. Okay. Next up, Kevin Gormley, another teacher, also coached at the high school. He said he knew Thomas had an athletic testing program, never witnessed the test, and knew what they were about. Gormley took over as basketball coach when Thomas was suspended. He at first says he wasn't told what was happening with Thomas. Gormley said at first Thomas had his full support. After speaking with former students, his opinion changed. He says Thomas continued reaching out, including asking him to be a reference for new jobs. And he didn't answer. I was never going to write him a reference, a letter, or speak to him again. Saying he was hoping Thomas would get the hint. But he eventually emailed him, telling him to remove him as reference, stop reaching out. Here's the question. In your experience, keep in mind, Dan York defended this guy. In your experience as a coach, are you ever alone with naked athletes? No. Cross-examination. Defense shows emails Thomas sent Gormley strategies for the basketball team after he was suspended. All right. Well, he said initially he was supporting him. Next witness. This is interesting. Sergeant Christopher Mulligan, North Kingstown Police Department. He was working as a detective in 2021. Says he was informed of the allegations made to the school, and he contacted the student. Former student was reluctant to come to the police station, wanted to stay an anonymous whistleblower. Sergeant Mulligan said the student gave him other names of people with similar experience. After contacting those students, he felt it was enough to move forward with the investigation. Mulligan said Thomas came for an interview at the police station with his then attorney. We'll see a video of the interview after lunch. Okay, but here's the part that I think with this North Kingstown case. So as someone that has followed it, and we've talked about it now with different legal experts, but I believe, here's what I think. that Thomas and his attorneys, Coach Thomas, they're set under the guise of he never touched anyone and no one can prove that he touched them. So, and that may be true, by the way. I think they're banking on, under the letter of the law, he never touched them, meaning their private area. He never asked them to touch him. And I think the defense felt, hey, this is a defendable case. But what I am learning and finding, what is just crushing them is, and it's coming out, is why was he lying about the program? Why was he? We can go through, he was doing Excel sheets. Well, that was to cover. That was to try to make it legitimate. What I find interesting is when asked about it. So Coach Thomas, Aaron Thomas, very good friendly, very good friends with Pork Boy. Very good friends. Pork Boy actually employed him, paid him for a while as an analyst, excuse me, on high school basketball. Mocked, as I've said, joked about it on the air. But what I think what they're underestimating is you're sitting there and, you know, why is he have these kids? Why is he in a room with these boys and he's making them undress and they're naked and then he's touching part of their bodies? There's no legitimate excuse for it. I think he and the attorneys, and we'll see, they may be right on this. I think they're hanging their hat on, you can't prove that he ever touched you in your private area, so to speak, although he came close, and he didn't force you to do anything. And they're kind of banking on under the letter of the law. But I think what sounds like is hanging out over this, so to speak, hanging out there, is what was he doing in the first place? And there was no legitimate reason for them to be naked. I mean, as one of the students said, I weighed 125 pounds. I didn't have any fat on me. As the school moved to, no, we're going to get a machine. You're not going to be alone in a room naked with these guys. And he wasn't doing it to everyone. And I think, here's what I think Coach Aaron Thomas, his outs are. He tries to say, well, it was voluntary. They didn't have to do it. But, you know, you have a coach saying, hey, you know, do you want to do the body fat test? You don't know everything that's involved. Oh, okay. You know, are you shy or not shy? I think he thinks, meaning Coach Thomas, I think he believes his out is, hey, I would say, are you shy or not shy? And I had these Excel spreadsheets and it was voluntary. But the fact of the matter is, you're a grown man. You're going into a closet, shutting the door, dark closet, having them undress, and then putting your hands up around. I mean, the fact is, they can't find, not that I'm aware of, they can't find anyone that will say, yeah, that's how you do the procedure. That's how you do the testing. Unless they come up with someone, we haven't heard of anyone, but I know prior to this, no one had been able to come up with an expert anywhere in the country that would say, oh, that's the way you do those tests. Because that's not the way you do the test. So if you're going to test someone's body fat, they could be in a t-shirt and gym shorts. You don't need to have them. Number one, you don't even need them just in their boxer shorts or underwear or just no shirt on that. But you certainly don't need them naked. But I believe he thought his out was, well, it was voluntary. And look, I did the Excel spreadsheets to show blah, 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 you know. Hey, I would ask them, are you shy or not shy? They decided to. He seems to me that he feels confident that they were giving consent. But what he was doing to these young boys, and they were boys, was something that you're an adult male teacher basketball coach. I want to repeat, folks, I haven't heard one legislator at the Rhode Island State House step forward and say, We are introducing legislation that will forever stop these types of no one is coming forward other than it was against union rules against union rules to ask him, hey, are you alone naked with those kids? Folks, you're not supposed to shut the door. You're not supposed to be alone in a room with someone with the door shut, let alone then, and I just mean the student is clothed and you're closed, let alone they're naked. I think he relied on young males, probably ashamed, probably, and several of them said that when he would press his thumb up on their thigh, that they had a reaction of getting a certain reaction, that they would probably just embarrass. And this guy totally exploited it. But what I will never understand is his pal down the dial was allowed to mock it, defend him, hang up on parents, hang up on students that went through it. That is just, it's so depraved. It is. It's sick. Folks, this portion of the program, now today is a little more pleasant than yesterday. It's brought to you by Watson Materials. Call them 401-885-0600. Landscape lighting, pavers, retaining walls, natural stone, cobblestone, decorative stone, Watson Materials. Call Sean today, 401-885-0600, Watson Materials, and look for them on Facebook, 401-885-0600. Now, I received an email from Peter. Peter needs a new roof, and he was listening to the program, and he heard me mention a roof company that I recommended. I think in the email he said he had some dripping. Roof Co. Rhode Island. Peter, called them or anyone. If you're listening or watching right now and you need a new roof, 401-868-7149. 401-868-7149. Roof Co. Rhode Island. Leaky roof, missing lifted or curled shingles, granules in the gutter, or maybe damaged chimney flashing. Roof Co. RI, Roof Co. Rhode Island. Look for them on Facebook. They would be happy to give your roof a free inspection, free estimate to see if it has had any wind damage. Call Joe today at Roof Co. Rhode Island, 401-868-7149. Well, folks, good afternoon. I think the Aaron Thomas naked fat test coach, I think there needs to be more legislation of what's going on in the school. I also want to stress, you're not going to see it in the media, but why is the teachers union? Think of that. Why would it be against guidelines? Does that make sense to you? According to the teachers union in North Kingstown, because Thomas was a teacher and a coach, like most of them are, it's against their guidelines for one teacher. I actually had to read it like 4 times. Do you know it's against the union guidelines for one teacher to ask another teacher? They're both in the union. It's against the guidelines for one teacher to ask another teacher, do you have a student naked that you're alone with? Why would that be against the guidelines? Why would they have that in there? How often is this going on? How often is this going on that someone finally said, we got to draw up some guidelines about this. This is happening too much at too many of our schools with all these union members. They hired some new teacher, and the teacher's asking some of the other teachers on whether or not if they were alone with students that were naked. All right, we're going to draft something. We're going to put new guidelines. Hey, new rule, no asking. You can't ask, right? You're in this union. You're in this teachers union. And we have a new rule. If you are walking by a classroom and you see a teacher alone with a student and the student is undressed, starting now, you do not have the right to mention it to anyone or ask the teacher about it. Folks, who are they protecting other than pedophiles? The destruction of the public schools from the teachers' unions. The destruction of the public schools. Even as we talked to Dan McGowan, the big mystery, gee, why can't they fix the Providence schools? It's the blanking union. It's not that hard. This is like the ultimate, the emperor has no clothes. All these people that just mystify. Nate Bargatze, who I think is hilarious. He's my new favorite comedian right now. He does a bit that he had an aunt who was, she was deaf, and they didn't diagnose her that she was deaf until she was 9 years old. And it's great in his routine. And he says doctors, as they sat there blowing smoke in her face, they were baffled. And they said, I don't know what it is. And then one of them said, she's rude, I'll tell you that much. His aunt apparently was born deaf. Doctors could not accurately diagnose her with that till she was 9. Up until the age of 9. Doctors, as they sat there, blowing smoke in her face, baffled, were mystified. I like that. Well, she's rude, I'll tell you that. She doesn't answer. This is the ultimate. I don't know what's wrong with these schools. For some reason, it's the union with their rules. They've destroyed public education. The public education system in our area should be disbanded. You know, but they all act, it's all adults. They all act like it's a mystery. You know, it's a real mystery. You take a student, you put him in a Catholic school, they perform well. You put him in a charter school, they perform well. You put him in a private school, they perform great. For some reason, you put him in the public school, the traditional public school, because I know charters are public, and they're just not doing as well. It's a real mystery. Maybe it's the air, maybe it's the water, maybe it's something. No, it's the system they have. Unbelievable. You know, we have to put a halt to this. Are you guys, can you imagine at the teachers union meeting? Are you aware of what happened in North Kingstown? One teacher asked another teacher, did I see a student naked in your classroom as you were shutting the door? All right, that's it. We are putting a new rule going forward. I'm sure Jen Lima cheered it on. Going forward, there'll be no asking teachers whether or not they have naked students behind closed doors. We're putting a halt to this right now. Listen, it's so twisted. It just is. Of course it doesn't make sense. How could it possibly make sense? Who would do that? I come back with also, what if they were females? What if they were female students? What about all the, gender warriors? How about that? Coach Thomas has young teenage girls on his team, and they're undressed behind closed doors. Are you shy or not shy? How would that go over? The point I can't get past is the people that were defending him. Defending him. I view this, it's possible there's something wrong with me. I view that as indefensible. There's no legitimate reason why it was going on. Folks, this portion of the program, if you want to get your driveway paved, you're in luck. Call J. Perry Paving, 401-732-1730. Free estimate. Look for them on Facebook. Letter J, J. Perry Paving. High quality, fair pricing, exceptional service, free estimate any project. And remember, no one's better to veterans than J. Perry Paving. Call them today, 401-732-1730, 401-732-1730, letter J, J. Perry Paving. Well, folks, good afternoon, 1:48. Next week, I will be in court for opening arguments. I believe it starts Tuesday. Could be Monday, could be Wednesday, but I will be in court opening arguments of the Karen Reed case. Plan on broadcasting this hour right in Dedham outside of the courthouse. And if you haven't followed it, my advice, you can start watching it. It's going to be on YouTube. A lot of the Boston stations put it on their Facebook pages. It's an interesting case. I I believe my advice to you is watch the trial, and then you can come to your own conclusions. There's a lot of misinformation about it. I think the prosecution has a very strong case. I think they're going to put on a very strong case. I also, full disclosure, folks, full disclosure, I've never covered a murder trial where I was rooting for the defendant to get out of it. I haven't, and I'm not going to break my streak with this. I covered the Maya Brophy Bayerman case. I weren't rooting for those gang members. Let's hope they beat it. No. I covered the Freddie Bishop trial. I wasn't like, hopefully Freddie, come up with a third culprit. Nope. Any of those like that. I also covered, there was the kid in West Warwick, shot and killed, kid in the closet that time. No, I've never gone into, when I will cover the Charlotte Lester case, I'm not going to be secretly rooting for Perkins. No. And the Karen Reed trial is no different. There's a lot of noise around it, but if you're interested, I would encourage you just watch the trial yourself, and then you come to your own conclusion. I'm not trying to convert anybody. I'm not trying to convince everybody. You're adults. You can come to your own decision, but the trial should be starting sometime next week. We'll know more. We'll probably know later today, as a matter of fact, because I don't think there's court tomorrow, and they need to get one more juror. Folks, this portion of the program, so yesterday, boy, that was busy in East Greenwich. Great job by the East Greenwich police. They grabbed the bank robbery suspects out of Stonington, Connecticut. That was pretty good last night. Good job by EG police. And then yesterday also, they were demolishing, and they're going to rebuild the Hill Skeffington Funeral Home. And they're going to do a magnificent job. Hill Skeffington, I've known the Skeffington family my entire life, and it's Hill Skeffington Funeral Home and Cremation. When you're going to deal with this, and whether it's for yourself or a family member, you want to deal with people that are professional, that know what they're doing, they'll handle everything for you. I implore you to contact Hill Skeffington Funeral Home and Cremation, and you can call them at 884-9222. They haven't skipped a beat. The fire decimated that historic building they were in. They're going to rebuild, and they're going through the process right now of tearing it down. But remember, as we learn in Catholic school, dying is part of life. I had another friend who used to say, there's only one way out of this world. And it's true. But Hill Skeffington, they'll make it easier for you and your family. Funeral home and cremations. So let me just check some of the other headlines on this Thursday. Now that everyone has calmed down, I'm not gonna waste any time really on this tariff stuff. There's plenty of places you can see that. The fact the locals are like, we're gonna make Rhode Island tariff-free. It's the United States of America. Okay, it's the United States of America. We're not going to follow any laws. All right. So the market is back down now. Trump approved. Is it method or madness? Stocks stay manic. Dow down 1,200. Market chaos. My goodness. All right. But again, there's plenty of places if you want to track that. I in principle, I'll just say this, that regardless of who's in the White House, as I've said, it doesn't make sense that we're ripped off by other countries. Certainly, listen, we're in, and I don't know if the White House has fully argued this and explained it. We're in a trade war with China. We are. China's, I hate to say it, but they are. They're the enemy, pumping the virus towards us, fentanyl, ripping us off, their alliances with North Korea, Iran, Russia. We're not in a military war with China, but we're in a trade war with China. And I know it didn't happen overnight. And I fully get it. All these companies, yeah, we're going to set up shop. We're going to build things in China. They're going to be more expensive here in the United States. Well, as Donna Perry said, yeah, and in China, there's no unions, there's no health care, and you have 13-year-old kids working 12 hours a day. If you feel comfortable buying your goods from that, then that's one thing. But I think it's wise that they're exploring other options. And we want to bring some industry back to the country. So, what I believe that Team Trump, they're thinking long term. He certainly isn't a Governor McKee. And I think they're trying to find the ceiling. How high can we go? This is a negotiation. For all of the, as I mentioned, when you had the reporter saying, I was based in Brussels for 2 years, you never see an American car, because as soon as they get over there, they slap these expensive tariffs. Hey, then what's good for the goose is good for the gander then. They need us. As far as all these articles, well, Canadians are not going to, Canadians, we're giving Canada $350 billion a year. So as far as I'm concerned, so some Canadian tourists aren't going to come to the United States this summer. Oh, boo-hoo. You know when it starts to impact us? When it hits $351 billion. Up until then, what? Why are we giving them that money? And same thing with Mexico with these cartels. It's coming to an end. So, listen, the housing market is overinflated. A lot of this stuff is overinflated. But we're in a trade war right now. And I find it refreshing to have someone who's willing to try to make a difference. And they're trying to lower the debt. Everyone talks about the high debt the country's in. Well, they're trying to deal with that. But that doesn't make sense. So we take their imports, no tariff, and then you try to sell something in some of these countries and they slap a tariff on it. How does that make sense? It makes no sense. Folks, hold firm. Hold firm. I'm still 100%. And I like Peter Navarro. We've had him here on the program many times. Peter's a brilliant guy. I'm sticking firm. You can't listen to McKee and these dingbats. They have no idea what they're talking about, as a matter of fact. All right, now, let's see. Ken sent me an email. Ken needs his pickleball court resurfaced. Heard me mention a company he could call. Yes, call Corey, Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. You can also look for them at the home show, but call them 401-283-9815. They do sport court resurfacing, pickleball, tennis, basketball. They epoxy garages and patios, decorative concrete flooring. They can make your payment look like new. Call them for a free estimate. Quality Asphalt Seal Coating, 401-283-9815. 401-283-9815. Now, your chance to talk to them in person is going to be happening, and it's open now. The Spring Home Show at the Rhode Island Convention Center. You're going to be able to stop by their booth and ask them about your special project of maybe it's a parking lot, or maybe it is in fact a sport court that you need resurfacing. Whatever it might be, you can contact them, contact Corey, and better yet, stop by at booth 314 at the convention center. Booth 314, and it opened today and it runs through Sunday, and it's Quality Asphalt Seal Coating. Well, folks, good afternoon. 157. Again, repeating our top story. I think right now, Attorney General's office, I think they're making headway with this case against Aaron Thomas, the North Kingstown Fat Test coach. And I think there's a lot to come out of this. Like, as I mentioned, I don't understand why it would be against union regulations that you can't even ask another teacher. How would you feel that wherever your child goes to school, if one teacher said, I thought I saw, let's make it a female student. I think I saw a female student and she had her shirt off after school in the classroom with Mr. So-and-so. But under union guidelines, that teacher can't ask the teacher about it. That's P. Diddy mentality. right? Like who would even come up with something like that? The teachers union would, of course. They protect these people. No matter how many groomers or whatever word you want to use, uh, perverts or just complete degenerates that sometimes end up as teachers. How about how the union makes it? They've set up guidelines. You can't ask another teacher. That seems so foreign. I don't know why the school committees even accept it. I think the school committee should say, no, no, no. We're getting rid of that. From now on, if you're a teacher and you think you see a student with no clothes on in a classroom with a teacher behind closed doors, no, you have the right. You have the right to ask them about it. All right, folks, on this Thursday, April 10th, if you're listening to the radio, stay tuned for the 2 o'clock news. Everyone else, we will see you later tonight on Road Patrol Live.